Pinkerton's Ghosts is a horror anthology podcast by Superversive Radio, with no affiliation with any detective agency, person, real or imagined, or the dark forces of Outre Terre. It is not intended for children.
Jack Morrow here, reporting a werewolf attack in my area. Screams ripping through the night woke me up. I was deep in one of my bunkers hidden around the Ozark Mountains. I should not have heard anything. I thought it was a nightmare at first, but I was awake, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed. I felt that I was being commanded to get up and get ready to fight. I was not going to resist the call to act. I was sleeping in my clothes. I had been rushing around on my mission to dismantle the Grand Masons and collapsed when I was safely away. Whatever vengeance I wanted, I had to rely on God for it now. I adjusted myself and loaded my 1887 shotgun to bear. It was hot and humid, but wind blew hard and fast, and it kept me cool enough. My blood was pumping. I was smiling. I felt the call of a hunt. Something was out in the night, and I was being called to hunt it. I laughed, long and loud, for the exhilaration of the run and the night and the threat. I did not feel like this when I was attacked by suspected Grand Mason targets. This forest was mine, and no others. I heard shouts over the hill nearby. I shouted back, telling them to come to the sound of my voice. The voices struck me as childlike, so I shouted again, listening to their location and bearing. I tracked them through the forest and charged out. The trees here were close, and the leaves thick, but the moon was full and bright. I felt more and more energy pour into me. I dodged through the trees, under and over branches. The moon was unbearably bright, and the light broke through the shadows every which way. I dashed through the bars of shadows thrown by trees. I was the lord and master here. I leaped across a creek bed and landed in front of two children caught with their backs to the water. They screamed. I could not blame them. I must have been a sight. I leaped out of the gloom with shotgun in hand. My hat was barely on my head, my boots were covered in mud, and my coat flew behind me like wings. Before me stood a young boy, maybe 10 years old, and his sister, who was a toddler. They fell back shouting in alarm. I did my best to calm them down. They believed I was not a monster, but it took some doing. The three of us heard something charging through the trees. The children lost their fear of me and backed away from the sound until they were behind my legs. I slung my shotgun across my back and gathered the two in my arms. I jumped back across the creek and put them down. I knelt on the creek bank and readied my shotgun. Whatever hulking thing stopped just out of sight. The moon was full and bright, but I could not see so far as to identify the monster. I saw gray, large claws, but no head, no tail, nothing I could mark down. Werewolf? Skunk ape? Ancient bear? Skinwalker? Hey, kid! What's going on here? What's on your tail? The boy answered, There's a werewolf. My sister and I were playing outside, and he chased us into the forest. We ran away, but he found us again. I nodded, while keeping the gun pointed at the werewolf's direction. How do you know he's a werewolf? The boy tried to keep his sister standing. Prolonged terror made her unsteady on her feet. He looks like a dog, and he looks like a man together, like Hotel Transylvania. He dropped his sister down and pantomimed a snarl. I remember seeing posters about that movie. That's a good werewolf, kid. Alright, I'll kill it for you. I do it all the time. Just stay back and protect your sister. Yeah, kill him. The kid was excited for it. Good man. The werewolf was getting closer. I took the risk and shouted, Werewolf, you are trespassing on my land and you have terrorized my neighbors. Come forward and answer for yourself. I may be lenient. The voice that answered was loud, masculine, and almost jolly, like a dangerous gangster sharing a joke. Ha ha! Jack Morrow, lenient! Is it opposite day? Are you a mirror werewolf, where you become gentler in the full moon? I heard you speak to the child. The werewolf stuck his head out to speak. He was a massive beast, and stood nearly 7 feet tall. His muzzle was white as were the tufts of hair sticking out of his ears, and his head was gray. His teeth gleamed in the moonlight, more white than the moon itself, and his eyes glowed orange in the dark like twin flares on the road. It's true, but maybe you were driven away by some greater enemy, and these children happened to be in your way. Maybe. He was out of range. I had buckshot loaded into the shotgun. I could hop swap the shot to a slug, but I could not trust that the beast could not make it across the distance in time. Werewolves were all over the place in power and speed compared to one another, but all of them were dangerous. Buckshot may or may not pierce the skin, but it would knock him down. No such thing! I am out for a meal. We know you wiped out our breeding outpost a few months ago with those 2 newbies. We know what you are, and what your spirit is. You are like us. There is no negotiation with you. But with me, I am merciful. Give me the children and you can go free. I am a true Roman wolf. I keep my word. I pointed behind me and the 2 kids walked in that direction. The boy had his sister on his back. I walked back with them, keeping the gun pointing at the werewolf. Roman wolf, huh? Empires fall. Are you gray because you rolled around in the ashes? Very funny. You know, we Roman wolves were the backbone of Rome. We fought for control of the world. We raged against the Persian vulture. Sure, the crescent moon beat out the full moon, but you can't blame a weak breed for their faults. Have you seen dogs these days? The werewolf noticed we were backing away and crept closer, keeping trees between him and me. I had a bit of inspiration. He must think I have silver, or something similar. Lead can injure a werewolf, but they can take a lot of damage before dying without silver. If I could crack his skull open, or rip out his heart, or bleed him out, well, thinking about it would be counting chickens before they hatch. Silver turned a tough-skinned monster into a ballistic gel dummy, and poisoned them besides. I thought about firing a shot to keep him honest, but it might embolden him. He was too far away yet. At some point he'd get close, and make a mistake. He slipped from tree to tree, getting closer all the time. My bunker was close by. If we could reach it, then we could lock him out and wait for morning. I'd instruct the kids on what to say, and everyone gets home safe. Except for the werewolf. I was going to hunt him down. Guys like that are far less stealthy than they think. I'd have his pelt for a coat, or I'd stand over his dead body. No one becomes a werewolf from virtue. I waited for him to get to the creek. He could walk through it, but the mud and rocks were dangerous, and could slow him down. If he jumped, he'd be an open target for my gun, If I had him on his back, it would be nothing for me to pump him full of holes until I hit something vital or he was weak enough that he couldn't react anymore. While the werewolf stayed cautious, I assessed my arsenal. I had my great-grandfather's 1911. At my belt, several knives hung in their sheaths. I had forgotten my little holdout I kept in a holster on my ankle. I should have put a thought into the preparation, but the call was undeniable. I had to answer, "What's your name?" Now he was near the creek. Would he choose to jump, or would he go directly through? I did not like the look in his eye. The creek was not deep. Anyone could walk up the side, just about the perfect angle firing down. He had to choose, or risk stalemate, and I am a patient man. Silverjack Fascio. That's a coincidence. Yeah, and I was named before you were born. I'm 40 years strong. Your guns aren't so great if you don't get a shot. Come on, boyo, take your shot. I kept my shotgun at port arms to keep myself from exhaustion. I could bring it to my shoulder in an instant. I felt the beast's tension as his claws ripped the bark of his protective tree, revealing the white wood underneath. His werewolf nature was burning within him. He wanted what he called his, those kids. To eat, to rip, to tear. Werewolves may have their personalities and peccadillos, but the wolf nature that they had sold themselves to always dominates. So he charged, and I fired. I anticipated a leap, but he dived, and the buckshot flew over his shoulder. A few of the lead balls hit his left ankle. He howled and scrambled down the center of the banks, flat as a stingray. I fired a few shots, but he never stuck anything over the creek bed I could hit. Soon he was out of range. I broke open the breech of my shotgun and slammed in some slugs. I felt good, but the body was so used to hiding and waiting for my enemies that my muscles didn't have the twitch speed. Maybe when I was mourning over my mother and the events of hell, I could have anticipated the shots. Grief overwrought does strange things to mind and spirit. It blows up the problems to proportions that would otherwise be bearable. It's similar to suicides. One friend goes down, and then, well, it spreads. The werewolf was out of sight. I grabbed the two children and ran with them in the opposite direction. I have been gone from this neck of the woods. Who knows what has been going on in my absence while I chased the Grand Mason leads. Not all of them were Grand Masons. I spent 2 months in Kansas over what turned out to be a network of chupacabra cockfights run by day laborers. A waste of time and a lot of dead chupacabras. There were a few spots I could take the children, but none of them could hide them from the werewolf's smell or hearing. So I took them in the opposite direction and maximized the distance. I did have the Unismasher nearby, but my car was too close to the hideout to be useful. About 3 miles north was a gas station that would open at 5 a.m. That was probably a few hours away, but, well, I had been found standing over monsters before and no one got arrested. I was afraid that people would blame the loner for kidnapping the kids. I put that fear away. Kill the werewolf. Push them at the gas station and not get caught on camera. Even in my worst circumstance, as long as I killed the werewolf, the kids would be safe. That's what matters. I don't do this for safety. If people complained, I dragged the werewolf corpse to court. Or just pay pittance Saint Devay. Being a good Samaritan is a Christian duty. Slaying the dragon is a Christian duty. Christian duty is in the service and not the fear. I slung the shotgun and picked the two children up and started to run. Going back across the creek in that westerly direction, I could go deeper into the forest, but I couldn't be sure of anything concerning the children's safety. They asked me questions, but I ignored them. Now was not the time for talk. The trees reached thickly towards me in my charges. Branches like hands would have torn them from me. The bark twisted from the formless pattern into faces and squinting brows. The boy was stoic, but the girl whined in fear. Whispers followed us. The werewolf had carried disease into my forest. Had he hunted in my lands before? Who had he slain? Some mobster or a Christian virgin new to life and brought to the lamb early as a martyr? I burned for hatred of this enemy. Strange voices murmured the secrets of the forest. They spoke of the cycle of life and death. They claimed that men were animals of the same order as all the other creatures, that man too will be eaten by worms, that feeding another would be virtuous, and never mind the violence of the taking of life. I cursed the forest. I could see shadows behind the trunks, staring at us. Their forms were long-limbed and bore feathers on their heads. These were the unsettled dead of some ancient pagan tribe. I knew that on certain days their shades would rise up and watch the fires of campers and more. Had the hunt disturbed them? Was it my absence from the Ozarks? Or maybe the bloodlust of the werewolf? I hoped they would go away if I killed my hunter. Maybe that's all that would happen. Shadowy witnesses to some ancient rite, where man puts down the beast, or the beast eats man. Maybe it was less than all that. Maybe they just wanted to see a death. I heard twigs snapping behind me. The werewolf was running my way. I cursed and changed course. We had only traveled half a mile. I bundled the children into an open outcropping of flat rocks. These were raised just enough to make it hard for the werewolf to run in, but low enough that I could treat them like a parapet. I knelt in the direction of the werewolf's charge. I saw movement that matched the sounds. I aimed and fired. The werewolf yipped and backed away, the wolf cries being replaced by human curses. I laughed to myself, a low chuckle. Is he dead? The boy was trying to care for his sister. We did not have anything to offer her. No, not yet. I could imagine what he was seeing. The gaunt man that had saved them had just shot the monster and was laughing to himself as if he told a joke. There was silence. The werewolf stopped cursing and instead he crept from tree to tree once again, looking for an opening. The full moon threw out too much light for him to hide in. The shadows almost avoided him. I watched red eyes dart from tree to tree. The skull shape warped in what shadows were forced to fall on him, from wolf to man and back to wolf. Sometimes he watched us for a minute, deciding his next move. He never seemed to blink, and as he got closer, the red light in his eyes glowed from within and floated in front of him like glasses. I could not stop smiling. Just a little closer, and I'd put out those dead lights. The kid asked me, "You're liking this?" Just a little. Or a lot. I didn't think I should downplay it to a child. I couldn't tell if he understood that sort of thing yet. Why would you like it? Well, there's the thrill and the excitement, but I could get that from video games. Kid, I have a smile on my face because I feel the power in my hands and the good I will do if I win. I am on the path God has intended for me. I will slay the werewolf and the world will be made better. God put me on this earth to hunt his kind. I am smiling for the joy of serving God." The boy was quiet. I might have gone too deep. "Dragons can be slain, kid, and I enjoy slaying them." I did not dare look him in the eyes. Instead, I watched as the werewolf stuck his body behind cover. "What's wrong, Wolfie? Can't charge in if the prey puts up a fight?" The pained shout came back with less confidence than before. "If it were a normal man, anyone else. But no, my prey is defended by a paranormal Pinkerton, and I am too hungry to leave." The head poked out from around a thick tree trunk. The shadows surrounded it, watching. The wolfish tongue glistened in the full moon. The voice became hollow with a strange resemblance. The eyes peeked out to stare at me. The pupils turned into bright red LEDs, illuminating the ground in front of him. "I cannot deny my hunger. I will break open your bones and lap the marrow. I will bind a book of my exploits with your scraps of skin. I will find your hidey holes and turn them into my mating burrows. This land that you claim as yours will be my land. Every inch and every life within. I know the hunger never ends, but the slaughter will continue to the beat of my own wicked heart." The boy backed away from the edge. I brought the gun to my shoulder and fired a slug. It tore a chunk out of the tree, but the werewolf seemed unaffected. It jumped out, crawling on all fours like an insect. The unholy, creeping thing dodged my shots. Here the slugs betrayed me. Something in its soul told it of the danger, and it slipped in, under, and around my aim. The slugs ran out, and the remaining buckshot clipped him, but nothing more than slices and dents into his pelt. I ran out of shells and threw the shotgun from me. I pulled out my 1911 and fired, but it was too late. The .45 ACP punctured his chest, but his momentum brought him close enough. He swatted the gun from my hand and then gripped my chest with his massive hand. We were a ball of violence and writhing muscle and bone. We roared and shouted and laughed. Death ruled us. I had a knife in my own grip, and I jammed my first knife into the meat of the shoulder. The second knife slit up the werewolf's wrist, and the crushing grip failed. His other hand raked my coat, reaching into my back, and I felt the searing pain and the heat of blood pouring out on me. I jammed my knife into his side and pulled my third knife. My left hand was caught, jammed into the monster's nose, while my right quested for his throat. My Bowie knife found his neck tendons and I sawed. Bloody murder ripped from my throat. His left hand grabbed my right, but the sharp edge cut his fingers to pieces. I let go of my Bowie knife and pulled out one of my scalpels. There was no rhyme or reason. I wanted to kill him. He wanted to kill me. We rolled over the kids who screamed and backed away. I was trapped by the arms and the mouth, but the strength of the beast pushed me back into the dirt and stone. Silverjack Fascio pinned me to the ground. My back was screaming in pain. My arm holding back his snout was failing. His teeth got closer and closer. They never told me that the hunger will not ever end. Yet every bite I rip from your body will make it stop for as long as your screams last. And then I'll eat the children one bite at a time. And he rushed forward, his tongue lapping at his neck. I was ripping through with my scalpel, and he did not care. The explosions brought us out of it. He stared at me in shock. I watched the fire burn out of his eyes. I could see the moonlight streaming out of them, but nothing infernal. Not anymore. The boy was holding my 1911 with both of his hands. I had not emptied the magazine when the beast charged, and he had put all the bullets into the thing's neck and skull. The boy shouted a wordless war cry. I whooped back. I rolled the body off me. My back hurt like hell. I wasn't going to get out of this anonymously. But then again, I could claim a bear attack and everyone would believe it. I got the gun back from the kid. It took him a moment to gather up his sister, who shook with fear and refused to leave a small dip in the rocks. I had to pick her up to get her going. I was losing blood, and I bet a doozy of an infection was incoming. The three of us moved quickly. The shadows had gotten close, but they left us alone, even parting as we power walked out. I collapsed 100 feet from the gas station, seeing the lights of the police and rescue workers gathering together, likely to help find these missing kids. I awoke when some paramedics lifted me into an ambulance. I went under again for a long while after. I left the hospital with a lot of stitches and sutures, but by the grace of God, the ribbons on my back were not as deep as the bone. I'm going to be down and out for weeks. Well, they said weeks. The police told me that the kids told them some crazy stuff, but they are just putting it down under a bear attack. The body was recovered and burned. Couldn't recover the pelt. What a pity. Jack Morrow, out.
Pinkerton's Ghosts is a podcast distributed by Superversive Radio, licensed under an attribution non-commercial, share-alike international license. This episode was written by Ben Wheeler and is performed by the same. Ben Wheeler edits, directs, produces, and herds cats. Kid Dickerson performs our audio editing. Visit us on Facebook, read articles on superversivesf.com, or listen to us on unauthorized Acast, iTunes, or Spotify. Contact us through Twitter at @PinkertonsGhosts, email us at pinkertonsghosts@gmail.com, or send us noble messenger possums with messages strapped to their backs. Don't worry, they know how to find us. Thank you for listening, and good luck.